Okay, I think we're recording. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Intro to iOS Development Demo 3. So I accidentally did not record my screen during the actual lecture, so I'm going to be re-recording the lecture right now. I'm in my room right now, so nothing crazy. So yeah, let me just share my screen real quick. Okay. All right, so let's start with Demo 3. Let's jump right into it. So first, please go to this website, lecture demo intro to iOS development. And here we have the zip file that you can just download, right? So just download it, just click on it and download it. And you'll see that it appears in my downloads folder if I go to downloads. So I'm gonna just drag and drop this onto my desktop so it's easier for me to see. Yeah, so when you open it, you want to double click the blue like delegation demo.xcode project. And it'll ask you like, do you want to trust and open it? And you just trust and open it, like just trust it. So now we got the file open. And now let's try running it. So make sure that the simulator is an iPhone 13. Oh, make sure the simulator is an iPhone 13. And let's just try running it. See what happens. Okay. Good so far. Okay, cool. So here is our delegation demo. It's nothing crazy. It's only like 4 things here. So let's just go through the files a bit. So in my view controller, I have my background view, background image view. I have a button, a push button, present button, and a message. And the message is like gray area right here. It's a UI label, so it's just where text get put into. And I also have a title here. And I have the background image view. As you can see, it's a little like hard to see exactly what it is. But if we look at the background, actually, we look at the background of that image, we could see that it's some file named iOS. So if we go into our assets folder, we could see that iOS is like right here. So we could actually like open this a bit, open with external editor. And it's just this PNG file of like some Swift thing. So let's see, it's just that on the screen. And the reason it doesn't look squished is because we actually set the background's content mode to scale, like to fill the screen. So as we like constrain the background image view to be like the constraint to the top, bottom, left, and right side of the screen, it will scale that image so that it doesn't look squished. So if I actually like comment this out, then it'll look squished. And we don't want that. We want things to look nice. So we set the content mode to scale to fit. And yeah, so that's the background image view. To kind of go over the rest of like what we have in this file, in the starter file, we have the push button. So the push button is this push controller button over here. And as we could see, when we click it, it just prints out this console command implement push. It just prints out like that string. And we could see that's tied to this push view, to this push view function here. And if we go down a bit, the push view function is defined here. So this is the function that we're going to be implementing later to push a new view onto the screen. And we also have this present view controller or present controller button, present button that has a title, the present controller for .normal, and it has a target where the target is equal to that present view function. It has a title color, which is white. As we can see, the text color is white. Background color is blue, and it has a corner radius of 15. So if we didn't have this radius here, the button would just look like a square, and we don't want it to look like that. That looks ugly. So let's give it some radius. And just like with every other like UI view, we want to make sure to translate auto resizing mask into constraints is equal to false. And then we just add the view to our subview. And again, this present view function that's tied to this present button is down here, and it just says implement present. So we know that when we click it, we have to implement it as it says. And yeah, those are the 4 things that we have right now. The constraints right now are just that the background's top anchor is constrained to the top anchor of the view. The left and right anchors are constrained to the leading and trailing anchor of the view. and the background's bottom anchor is equal to the bottom of the view. So basically the background is stretched to fit the screen. The message label is right here. And as we could see, the message label has a width, it has center X anchor, it has a top anchor and a height anchor. So we just set the width to be equal to negative, to be equal to the views width with a constant of -30. So we don't actually need this line right here. I think about it. Yeah. So we just set the width to be equal to the views width with a constant of -30 being subtracted from that width. So this label has like that same width almost, except -30 pixels. And we also have the center X anchor, we have the top anchor, and we have the height anchor. So we could see that the height anchor is equal to 300 pixels, so that's how tall it is. And then moving on to our push button is constrained to be just below this message. So its top anchor is equal to the message's bottom anchor, with an offset of like 10 pixels. And it's centered along the x-axis, and its width is equal to half of the width of the view. So as you can see here, we have push button dot width anchor dot constraint is equal to view dot width anchor with a multiplier of 0.5, which basically just saying like, okay, set the width of the button to be equal to the view's width multiplied by a half. So half of the view's width. So this button has half of the view's width as a width. And same thing for present button. Present button has a center X anchor equal to the view center X anchor, top anchor equal to the bottom of the push button. So the present button is actually equal to the bottom of the push button. So everything in every view within our view controller is top down, or it's constrained top down. So we constrain the message to the top, the push controller relative to the message UI label, and then the present controller relative to the push controller button. And that's how we like to do things here. So yeah, that's just going over the constraints a bit. Here in scene delegate, all we have added is a window root view controller, where the window that root view controller is equal to UI navigation controller. And basically what this is saying is we have a window scene equal to the scene that is a UI window scene. And we set this window to be a new UI window with that window scene being its window scene. And our root view controller in this case is going to be this view controller right here. And we set the Windows root view controller to be equal to a new UI navigation controller. And that UI navigation controller's root view is the root view controller, root VC. And window scene is basically just saying like, okay, the window scene is exactly what is being presented. The window scene is kind of what puts things onto the screen, like actually puts things onto the screen. And every window needs a root view controller. And in this case, our root view controller has to be a navigation controller, because the navigation controller allows us to push things onto the view or present new views. So we have different views coming from this root, but we need it to be a UI navigation controller. And that way we could actually push and present new views onto our app. And yeah, so that's just a little rundown of our app. So what exactly do we want to do today with this app? What are we trying to do? So our first task is going to be to push a new view controller onto the screen. And our second task is going to be to present a view controller onto the screen. So we want to push a new view and we want to present a new view. But when we present a new view, we want to incorporate some kind of delegation. In this case, what are we trying to delegate? So what we want to do is in the new view that is pushed or that is presented by the present view controller, we want that new view to be able to change the title of this view. So right now, the title is equal to view controller for this view controller that we're currently working on right now, like this one right here. The title is equal to view controller. I can change this to be like change. And what we want to do is when we click present controller, we want to present a new screen that has the option to change this title right here, this title that's on the view controller. So we want this other view controller to be the delegator to tell this view, which is the delegate, what to do. So we want to create a view that tells this screen, hey, like change your title. or else. Just kidding. We don't need the or else, but we can say stuff like that. And yeah, so how are we going to do this? So first, let's do the first task, which is going to be to push a new view controller. So when we push a new view controller, we want to, well, first, in order to push a new view controller, we have to create a view controller. So let's go ahead and create that. Here in files, let's go to new, let's go to file. And let's create a new Cocoa Touch class. So it should be the second thing here. If it's not there, you can just search for it, Cocoa Touch class. And under iOS, you click next. And it's convenient because it's already a UI view controller. But if this subclass is not a UI view controller, then just go on the dropdown and click UI view controller. And let's name this PresentViewController. So that's a convention. We always want to give it a name and then view controller. So in this case, it's going to be PresentViewController. And we want the language to be Swift. And we don't want to create a zip file because we're going to be programmatically laying out our views. So we don't need that file. And then just click next. And now we could actually create that new view. So let's just create it. And here is, lo and behold, our PresentViewController. So we could just delete all this gray stuff. It's unnecessary. And just to verify this is a new view, let's do view that background. So actually, I just realized the first function that we're trying to implement is a push controller, is that push controller function, because it's definitely going to be the easier one to implement. So we created the present view controller, which is great, but this present view controller we're going to be using for the present view function that's called by the present controller button here. So we actually want to be working on the view controller that's tied to the push controller button. So we actually want to be creating a new file. Let's create a new file here. File, new file. Oops. And let's create a push view controller. So this push view controller is going to be the view controller that we push when we press the push controller button. So same process as before. We just call it push view controller. Make sure it's a subclass of UI view controller in Swift. Click next, click create. And here is our push view controller. So you could also delete the gray stuff here. No worries. And just to verify that this is a new view, let's give it some distinct background color. So we could say view that background color is equal to dots in pink. Right. And let's give it a title. Why not? So title is equal to push view controller. We set the title. We set the background color. Now let's actually push this view when we click the button. So going back to our view controller file, in our push view function, this is where we want to push the new view, right? Because this push view button or this push view function is tied to the push button, where the push button, when pressed, as soon as we lift up our finger from that button, it will execute this push view function. So let's do that. Let's go and do navigation controller dot push view controller. And in this case, the view controller that we want to be pushing is our push view controller. Make sure to add these parentheses. And we want to make sure that it's true. And just a quick aside, the reason that we want to be adding these parentheses is because we're trying to push a new push view controller object. So this push view controller is a class, or it's a view controller, but we want to be, when we push a new view onto it, we want to be creating that view, like so that we could actually push that view. Because if I didn't include these parentheses, push view controller is just a type of something. So it's not actually a screen. It's just a type of what a screen would be, of what a view controller would be. So in order to create that push view controller, we got to add the parentheses. So now this is no longer just a type, but a object, a push view controller object that we could physically push onto the screen. So let's see if this does anything. So now the button prints implement push, but along with that, it pushes that new view controller. So let's see. Push controller, fingers crossed. It works. Cool. Amazing. So as you can see, the background's pink It's PushViewController with an exclamation mark. And conveniently, when we push a view controller, we have this back button here that we could just go back to the screen with. So if this misses this PushViewController, we just go back and forth, back and forth. Very relaxing. And yeah, and we could just comment out the print statement since we already implemented it. So that's basically all we need for a push view controller. The rest you could just add to whenever you want. Like if you want to add more sub views to it, you're more than welcome to. Same way as we add our views here, like background, push button, present button. Same way we added those here, you could add to a push view controller. And a push view controller doesn't have to be called push view controller. Like this view controller could be called like anything really, but for our purposes, we're just gonna be calling it a push view controller. And yeah, so there's the push view controller. Now let's try to implement the present view. So this present view controller we had made earlier. It's right here. So we don't have to make it anymore. We don't have to make it again. And what we want this new present view controller to do is, like we said earlier, we want it to have the ability to change the title of this view right here, of this main view, of the root view, the view controller. We want to change the title. It says change me, so we're going to try to change it. But in order to change it, we need to, in our present view controller, have at minimum two things. We have to have some input that could take in an input title, like taking an input string that will replace this title. And we need a button to be able to change. It has to do two things. It has to change the title, like there has to be a function that changes the title. And it also has to dismiss the view. So as soon as we present a view controller, we want that button to dismiss that view when we click it. So in this present view controller, in this new view that we're going to be presenting, we want to have a probably text field and a button. So let's go ahead and create those things. So create a text field. Let's say change title text field. We can see text field. And let's change, let's say submit button to button. So we have our change title text field and our submit button. And typically when you create variables, you want to make sure that they make sense with respect to the object that they are. So for example, I want this button to, or I want this text field to change the title. So I called it change title. And then I added the text field at the end, so we know it's a text field when we're referencing it. And also, if you notice, I lowercase that first character in my variable name, and that's called camel case. So in camel case, the first character of the variable that we create is always lowercase. So whenever you create variables, make sure, or variables, or let's make sure to always use lowercase for the first character. That's just standard. And yeah, so now we created our text field and our submit button. So now we want to add these things to the screen. We want to give them some cool properties, right? So let's actually not set the background color to be pink. Let's set it to be white. And let's set up the change title text field and button. So first for the change title text field, we want a placeholder probably for it, right? Like we want some gray text that says like input title here or something. So let's add a placeholder. And in this case, the way to add a placeholder is just doing like that change title text field, that placeholder, and setting it equal to some text. In this case, we're going to be like input new title. And then I already know, like after having done this project, that we want the font size to be a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to do it now. So let's make it a system font of size 20. That way it's pretty big. And I think what else? We also want to make sure that the text is centered. So we could do like that text alignment, I think. Yeah, text alignment equals dot center. So this is basically saying that the text is going to be aligned within the center and not like left aligned or right aligned. And now let's add this to our subview. That's basically all we need for a text field. So add subview, title text field. And let's do the same with the button. Let's actually have that button have stuff on it. So first we want to give it a title. Let's call this button submits. the title for dot normal. And we also, oh, actually almost forgot, but you also want to make sure you do change back in change title text field. Make sure to set its translates auto resizing mask constraints to be equal to false. And just to kind of repeat, the way you get that text to appear automatically without having to finish the text is just pressing the tab button. So when I do like submit button dot like set title color, dot set title color, like it's highlighting that right now. So all I gotta do is press tab. I just press tab and then it automatically fills in the rest for me. And then I could just fill in these parameters. So we want the color to be similar to these buttons. So let's set it to be white. And let's set it for dot normal. And we also want to make sure that our submit button has rounded corners. So let's do layer dot corner radius is equal to 15. So it's rounded. And we also want to make sure that the background color is blue as well. So let's set the background color to be equal to that some blue. And last but not least, translate auto resizing mask constraints defaults. And now we could add this button to our subview. And now I know we haven't tied an actual function to this button yet. We'll do that later in a second. So don't think I forgot about that. But okay, we have our change title text field. We have our submit button there. They're created, and now we can constrain them. So let's create a function. Function setup constraints. And we want to call this function at the end, setup constraints, at the end of our view did load. And we want this to constrain stuff. So let's just do ns layout constraint, activate, then press enter on that text, on that highlighted text. And let's constrain the title text field. Okay, let's think about how we want to constrain these things. So we definitely want that change title text field to be a little bit below the top of the screen, because we want it to kind of match that where the title would actually be on the screen. So we want it to be a little bit below the view's top anchor. And then our submit button should be a little bit below that text, that text field. So it should be like maybe 30 or so pixels below that, just so it's close, so it makes sense. So let's set that up. So let's do change title. We want the change title text field top anchor to be constrained to the view.safe area layout guide top layout guide top anchor. Right, so we want the top anchor to match the safe area layout guide's top anchor. Let's give it an offset of like constant. Let's say we want it to be like 20 below. So let's let the constant be 20. Just move a bit. Yeah, that is good. That's good. Okay. Yeah, so we want it to be 20. And let's also make sure that we want it to be centered like with the view, right? We want it, like the title is in the center of the view. So let's make our center X anchor equal to the view center X anchor. So let's constrain it. The view dot center X. And besides that, our text field is basically done. Because if you think about it, the title text field, its height is already set based off the font size of the text. So we don't really need that. We also have a placeholder. So that also already sets the height of the text. And we don't need a width because the width is already defined by the font size of the text. So, and we already have a placeholder there, so it doesn't even matter. So I think that's all we need for our change style text field constraints. So let's do the same thing for our button now. So remember, we want our button to be constrained a little bit below that change style text field. So let's do ns layout constraint that activate and then press enter. You see that blue stuff? You can just delete that middle part. And let's set the button to be a little bit below and also centered along the x-axis. So let's do submit button top anchor constraint equal to change title text field bottom anchor with an offset of, let's take 20 as well, just be consistent. So now the button is going to be 20 pixels below the bottom of the title text field. And let's say we also want it to be centered along the x-axis. So center x anchor that change equal to, to kind of save us some lines, let's just say equal to change title text field dot center x anchor. Since they're basically the same anyways, or the change title text field center x anchor is the same as like the views center x anchor, so it's fine. And now the thing is that with the button we need a little bit more. So the button doesn't, we have to define it, its width at least. So let's actually define this width. So submit button dot width. Let's set it equal to half of the size of the width of the screen, just like how we did these buttons. So let's set the width anchor to be equal to constraint equal to the views dot width anchor with a multiplier of 0.5. So it's going to be half of the views width. And that should be good. So now we have our present view controller done. So this is a whole other view. You think of present view controller as a whole other view. This view controller, like this view controller file right here, as its own other view, and this push view controller as its own other view. So all these three things are three distinct views. We have three views, three screens that kind of look like this in one way or another. And right now we finished setting up our present view controller screen. So we finished setting up a third screen basically, but now we want to actually present it so we could see what's going on, right? So the question is now, how do we actually present a view controller? So what we want to do is we want to present the view controller as soon as we press the present controller button on this screen, on the view controller screen. So the function is right here. This is the function that's executed when the present controller button is pressed. So if I go back up, present button is this present controller button right here. And it has a add target, and the add target is this present view, right? So this present view is this function down here. And we still have yet to implement it, like as it says right now, like we have to implement it, implement present. And we will. And it doesn't have to yell at us. So we could just comment this out now. So, okay, how do we present a view controller? So it's as simple as just writing out presents, and then this third option right here, presents underscore animated or whatever. And what are we presenting? Well, we're presenting our present view controller animated to true, with completion being nil. And basically what this completion is saying, the reason we set it to be nil is because we don't want there to be, when we present this view, we don't want there to be any reason to close it. We don't want to give the view controller a reason to close our present view controller. We want the present view controller, this new view, to dismiss itself, right? We don't want this view controller to dismiss our present view controller like on its own. Like it doesn't have the power to do that. We don't want to give it the power to close our view. So we're going to set the completion to be nil because we don't want this to close. We don't want it to complete based off anything that the view controller says. So we're just presenting a view controller, and for all we know, that will stay, present view controller will stay there forever unless we remove it from the view ourselves, like unless we slide down on it. And you'll see what I mean in a second. So moment of truth, let's try testing this out. Let's rerun. And if I click present, ta-da, new screen, cool. And the way I dismiss this view now, because the button doesn't really do anything, I just have to slide down. I just have to grab it and slide down, right? I'm sure you guys have seen some kind of like UI like this on some app. Oops. So we just gotta like click it, sort down, click it, sort down. And that's all you gotta do to dismiss it. So that's that. And now, what do we actually want to do now? In this new view, we have our input new title input, and we want that input to change the title of the previous screen. So when we input a new title here, we want to be like, my cool new title. And when we click submit, we want the view to dismiss, and we want that change me title to change to that text that I input, right? So this is this is basically like communication between two screens. This is what we've been talking about with delegation. So how do I actually communicate one thing to another screen, one screen to another screen? How can I facilitate that language? And so let's get started on that, right? So going back to the analogy that Justin talked about with delegation, right? We have a chef, we have a customer, and we have a menu. So that customer is given a menu, right? And the customer doesn't know how to actually cook the things on the menu. Like there might be a hamburger there, it might be a pizza, some pasta, but the customer doesn't necessarily know how to cook those things. Let's just assume the customer doesn't know anything at all. Like he can't cook anything at all for his life. And so he needs the menu in order to tell the chef exactly what he wants to make, what the customer wants. So the customer might ask for pasta. Customer doesn't know how to make pasta, but the chef does. So the customer is going to ask the chef, hey, can I get some pasta? And the chef's going to be like, I got you. Like, let me go in the kitchen, chef it up a bit, and I'll do that pasta for you, right? And so that customer is telling that chef what to do. That customer is the delegator to the delegate. In this case, our delegate being the chef. So in this case, what view is trying to tell another view what to do? So what we want our present view to do, this view right here, this view right here, we want this view to tell our main view controller here to change the title, right? We're telling it to change the title. This view right here, this present view, doesn't know exactly how to change that title. Like for all this view knows, it's the only view in the world. Like it has no concept of any other views. So it can't actually communicate with that other view behind it. But regardless, we want this view to communicate to the other one that it has to change its title, right? So in this case, this present view controller is the customer. It's the customer that's like, can't make pasta, and the pasta is like changing the title. But the chef, this view, doesn't know how to do that. It doesn't know how to change the title, right? Like we could see it like right here. If we go to view controller, like I could change, like the view controller can change the title, right? I just gotta change that, and boom, like that, like it's just changing that title string, and boom, it's changed. But I don't want, like, we don't want the view controller to be doing, or we don't want us to manually be doing that. We want that present view controller to tell that view controller to push or to change the title. So all of that being said, that's the concept of delegation. It's definitely a little tricky to explain. So if you don't understand it on the first try, feel free to ask us for any questions on ed or anything. But yeah, so let's start attempting to do this delegation stuff, right? So with any good restaurant, they have that menu, right? We don't have a menu at all for the customer right now. This present view controller has no menu whatsoever. It has no idea of what it even wants. So let's give it a menu. So right here, our present view controller, like I said, our present view controller is the customer. So we want to create a menu. So the menu is the protocol in this case. So the protocol, let's call this, what do we want to call it? Change info delegate. So it's going to change the info in the view controller. And we want to make sure that it is of type UI view controller. Oops. And the reason we're setting it up this way is because we want this delegate to be able to tell another view controller what to do. So in order for this delegate to tell another view controller what to do, it itself has to be of type UI view controller. Like if this was a type UI button, I would not, this delegate would not be able to tell the view controller to do anything because it's not a type of UI view controller. So in order for it to be a boss, it has to be of type UI view controller. And now this is the menu, right? So the menu is empty. So let's give it some options. Let's put the pasta in, right? So let's create a function change title that is going to take in a string, and we don't know what it's going to do. We're just saying that there's this function change title that's going to take in a string, and that's it. We actually don't know. We don't even know what the output's going to be. We just know we want a function that takes in a string. And that's the menu, right? That's all we want. We want the function change title. In the name, it says change title. So that's the expected behavior we want. And it's going to take in a string, is all we know. We don't know exactly how it's going to do that. But we have the menu. The customer now has the menu. So now let's actually give the chef some instructions on how to change that title. So the chef, the push view controller, the view controller, my fault. The view controller is chef. And right now the chef has no skills. The chef has no idea how to do anything. It's as bad as the customer. So we don't want it to be as bad as the customer. So let's actually give it some direction and tell it how to change the title. So right here at the top of the file on line 9 about in view controller, all we got to do is add a comma and be like, hey, view controller, you have to conform to this other protocol. In this case, the protocol is change info delegate. We just copy and paste that. And now it's conforming. This is what conforming means. When we say view controller conforms to this change delegate, we're saying that view controller is we say like view controller and then like colon and then whatever it's conforming to. And what this is saying is basically like the view controller, this class, has to implement the functions that come with this delegate. So what the functions that we defined here, change title, has to be implemented by this view controller now. And as you can see, it's yelling at me right now, right? It says type view controller does not conform to protocol change info delegate. And do you want to, it asked me, do you want to add the protocol subs? And indeed I do, right? So I'm going to click fix right here and boom, automatically inserts the function for me. I don't even got to do anything. So now we have the delegation function. This is the function change title. And we want this change title to take in a string. So this is the chef, right? We want, like, the chef should know what to do. So it has a function. Now we're going to actually define what the function does. And it's going to change the title. So how do we do that? Well, it's as simple as saying title is equal to str. Boom. Now we set the title to be that string. So the title will now, whatever input that string is, the title will change to whatever that string is. So this is how the title is actually going to change. But now the question is, we have the chef, we have the customer, we have the menu. The customer has the menu. But if the customer can't tell the chef how to do anything, if there's no communication between the chef and the customer, how is this meal going to get made, right? Like, how is this function going to execute? And so that's the question with this present view controller here, right? We don't have any like connection. We don't have any ties to the view controller. So what we want to do is we want to give, when we actually present this view controller, like when we click this button, present this view controller, we want to give it some tie to like the main view controller, the view controller that it came from. So whatever view controller it came from, we're going to pass that view controller that it came from as a input to this new view controller. And so what do I mean by that? How do we do that? We're going to create a weak var delegate. Our delegate in this case is going to be like a view controller. And we want to make sure that it conforms to type change info delegate. So we create the delegate here. This is a delegate input. So see here how we don't actually set it to be equal to anything. Delegate is not, we don't create we don't let delegate equal anything because we just know we want a delegate. And when we're going to set it equal to, or what we're going to set it equal to is going to be this view controller when we take it in as an input. So in order to have this present view controller to take in an input, we have to create an init function. So let's create an init function that takes in this new delegate, change info delegate. And let's actually call this like input delegate, right? So it's like not as confusing. So this input delegate is the input, and this delegate is the delegate that the present view controller contains. So we want to set this delegate, our delegate in this view, delegate, equal to something. And what exactly do we want to set it equal to? Well, we want to make sure that this delegate is equal to whatever input delegate we get that gets input, right? So let's set equal to input delegate. And as you can see right now, when I created this initializer function, it's yelling at me. It's saying like, required init, initializer, coder, all that, yada, yada. So let's just fix it. Whenever you get these errors, like something like that, always make sure you click on it, because most of the time, like if you click on it and it says fix, that it'll fix your errors sometimes. Sometimes not, but most of the time, yes. And another thing, super.init isn't called on all paths. So the last thing we want to do in our initializer function is call the super.init. And we want to make sure it's init nibname bundle. And if you could guess what both these inputs are going to be, they're just going to be null because they don't actually do anything. Actually, fun fact, what this super.init file is basically saying is like, hey, we're trying to look for like a nib file of this nib name. And what nib files are basically like formatted, they're like formatting files that tell the screen where like buttons and where UI labels and where UI images are on the screen. So you know how we like programmatically did it, like by setting like top anchors and center X anchors and all that down here in setup constraints. There's files that like do that for you, kind of like how Storyboard does it, except nib files came from the Next software company. And if you guys don't know, the Next software company only started because Steve Jobs got fired from Apple. And so he made a new company called Next. And so that's to say, we got Steve Jobs getting fired from Apple to thank for giving us these super.init functions and required init coder stuff. So bless up Steve Jobs. But yeah, so there's our delegate. And like this line is very standard. Like we're going to be doing this every time we create an init function, basically. So get used to typing this out. And yeah, so now we get our delegate. We have our delegate actually like here now. And in this case, like we said earlier, our delegate is the view controller. The view controller is what we're telling it to do. And the delegate is the chef. So we actually have the chef here now, right? We have our chef. And the issue is now we have no function to use that chef, which is what we were supposed to do with the submit button, right? So in this PresentViewController, we want this submit title button to do something. So in order for it to do something, we have to add a target. So let's do that real quick. So submit button to add target. And we want to add a target self. And the action has to be some selector of some objective method. And for dot touch up inside, we want it to execute when we touch it and then lift up our finger. And what should we call this function? Well, since this function is dismissing and changing the title of the text, let's just call it that. Let's call it like here, at objective function, change title and dismiss. So now this function is going to change the title and dismiss the view. So we want to change title and dismiss view. So these are two things that we wanted to do. Let's make sure we set the selector function to be that. So change title. Oh, nope. Change title and dismiss. Right. So, okay. So dismissing the view is easy. It's just dismiss true and no. So it's just going to dismiss the view and it's going to be animated because we love animations. Let's try running it. Oh yeah, I forgot. Okay. So we got this error here, right? So why do we have an error? So let's click on the error, click up here. Missing argument for parameter input delegate. Ah, okay. When we created that PresentViewController, when we added the init here, we required on creation of this PresentViewController, this initializer basically saying like when I create a PresentViewController object, I have to take in some delegate, right? So it has an input now. So this PresentViewController has to have something in here, right? So if I click here on ViewController in the error, I have a fix here, right? Missing arguments. it has to take in an input delegate. That input delegate that I made here, input delegate, takes in a delegate, right? And so that's what this initializer is saying. This PresentViewController object now has to take in some delegate. And in this case, what do we want our delegate to be? So like we said earlier, our delegate is the chef, and the chef knows what to do. And our view controller is a thing that knows what to do. It wants to change, it knows how to change the title. And so we want to pass in basically this view controller. So how do we pass in this entire view controller into this one line? And it's really simple, actually. All we got to do is do like self. And what self is basically saying is like pass in this entire thing, like the entire file itself gets passed in as a delegate, as an input delegate to our present view controller. So now this entire object is passed in as an input, as a delegate for our present view controller. So now our present view controller finally has some communication going on between it and the view controller. So there's finally some communication between the chef and the customer. So the customer can now finally yell at the chef to do what he wants it to do. So just to run it again, like I said, in our change title and dismiss function, we dismissed it so far. That's all the button does, right? So if we click present view controller, we have some input title, that whatever, and click submit title, it'll dismiss, but it doesn't change the title. So now we dismiss the view, so we can delete that. But now we want to change the title. So how do we change this title? And that's really simple now that we have our delegate. Our delegate has that function. Our delegate in this case is the view controller, right? And this view controller has that change title function. So given that we have this delegate now, all we got to do is a little like delegate dot change, right? Delegate dot change title. And the input string is whatever string is here in the input new title, right? So whatever that string is, we want it to be passed in as an input to string. So we call that change title text field. So we just gotta do like change title text field text. And that text is what is going to be included. But that text is going to contain the new title that we want to change to, right? We're going to pass it into the change title function. Okay, it's yelling at me. So value of optional type string must be unwrapped by value type string. Okay, so what this basically saying is in the case that change title text field has nothing, then we have to, in case it's nil, in case that value is somehow nil for some reason, let's give it some default value, right? And this is what this double question mark is saying. If this is nil, it'll evaluate this change title text field dot text, and it'll ask if it's nil, put something else out. If not, put that like dot text out or whatever. So this is like a catch case where it will just set it to default if it's nil. And in this case, we want our default to be something like then input title or something. And okay, we have it now. So let's try running it. So click the run button. Let's present the controller. Let's put the new title in here. New title. And let's click submit title and see what it does. And it changes the title. That's crazy. Isn't that crazy? So we now have the ability to change information on previous screens when we're on another screen. If I make it all numbers, the title will all be numbers. This is like groundbreaking. Like and like for app development, like this is the next like this is like going from going to the moon to going to Mars. Like this is a crazy thing. Like trust me. You can now pass information from one screen to another. And I know it's like it seems very simple, or like okay, this does not seem very simple. It seems like a lot of work for such a simple task of changing the title, but this concept of delegation could be used for any objects. Like it's the same idea. Like you have a screen that wants to change information it wants to change the information of another screen. So we have a delegate and delegator right there. Boom. So what is the delegator? It's the thing that's asking the other screen to do or to change whatever it has to change. So whatever screen tells the other screen to do something, that screen that tells the other screen what to do is the delegator. And then the delegate is that screen that like does whatever it's told. And the protocol, like I said, is just the menu, and the menu always belongs to the chef. The menu should always belong to the, I mean, the menu always belongs to the customer. The menu should always be with the customer. In this case, the protocol is in the PresentViewController class because that's where we want our menu to be, with the customer. However, that doesn't mean that you can't put this in our view controller here. Like if I put it here at the bottom as well, this function will run exactly the same. There will be no errors. So new title. That's some neat thing that you should know. So that's why conventionally we put this protocol in our delegator, so that the delegator knows exactly what functions it's trying to have the other view execute. And yeah, that's basically it for this lecture. Another thing though, in this change info delegate, there's another way to actually implement this change title function. So instead of having the comma and then like the change info delegate here, what we could actually do instead, which is the convention actually, is we create an extension of that view controller and have it conform to change info delegate. So this extension allows for us to have a view controller conform to multiple delegates. So say we had like 20 delegates, right? Oh yeah, and also make sure to like fix the protocol subs or whatever. But let's assume that like we had like 10 different delegates to do 10 different things. We wouldn't really want to put all of those into one view controller. Like we wouldn't want to do like change info delegate and like change background delegate or something, because that gets messy really quickly. So instead, what we could do is we create an extension of this view controller class down here. We create an extension of it and have that extension of that view controller here, this view controller. We could have this extension conform to change it to the delegate that we want it to, right? So we do the same thing for other things. Like if I just copy and paste this, like this could be like change background. Say we had like a background delegate, then we could do stuff like that. We could have multiple delegates. We could have multiple extensions of the class that conform to multiple delegates. And in this case, we have our change info delegate, and we want it to change the title, and we want the title to be changed to that input string. So yeah, that's the whole process of delegation, basically. The idea, the concept, hopefully that's drilled into you. If you guys couldn't tell, we love the customer and chef analogy. It fits really well with all this. But like I said, delegation is it's a pretty hard concept to grasp. I definitely didn't grasp it the first time I heard about it in lecture. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to Justin or I during lecture or after lecture or before lecture, because we're probably there for all those times. Or just reach out or post a question on Ed. And yeah, hope you guys liked today's lecture. Again, sorry that I had to re-record it and sorry that I'm publishing it so late. But regardless, hope you guys enjoyed today's lecture and hope you guys have a great fall break. See y'all.